Yeah. So I guess for the first question, what's your earliest memory of money? Um, if I'm being honest for myself, uh, the first, I guess, time I guess really kind of thought about money was when I was in the sixth grade. I remember my teacher, she was like this tall, lanky, Caucasian woman. She was like, "Oh, I have some old clothes. Like, you can have them or whatever." And at the time, I didn't necessarily think like anything was weird or out of the ordinary. So like that statement kind of caught me off guard. I remember going home and just talking to my parents about it, and they were like, "Oh no, like you're fine." But apparently, like in the school that I was in, I was like one of the only, or I don't say one of the only, but it wasn't necessarily a lot of minorities. So yeah, that was probably like my earliest conversation about money. But otherwise, honestly didn't really have too many experiences where I really thought about it as a child. It wasn't past that. It wasn't until like I guess when I was starting to go to college, and I figured out that I had to like pay tuition and all this stuff because I didn't have like scholarships and grants and all that. So it was like, how am I going to like get these loans to make sure that I can actually like go to school and like finish school and all that. But that's what it is for me. How about you guys?
I guess for me, I guess it was around the same time. Um, like I know, like I was looking at some of the questions, so I guess I'm kind of approaching this a little bit early. Like I was one of the kids that did get an allowance. My dad, he just gave my sister and I a little something, something. We didn't really have to do anything for it, just kind of, something so we could play around and buy our own stuff. Um, so I don't know about the rest of y'all, but when I was a kid, I was heavy into Pokemon cards. So, get my little $5, $10, go to the 7-Eleven and down the street, buy me a pack of Pokemon cards. Um, and that kind of became like the impetus for me like starting a relationship with money because $5 was cool, $10 was cool, but that only got me one pack. What if I want two or three? So now I'm like 10, 11 years old. I'm trying to figure out how I can make some extra money. Um, and that kind of started me down this track of like really starting to understand like what money was and like how to use it. Start figuring out stuff around the house, like, oh, like what can I do to make some money? It's like, oh, like I can cut grass. So, I started cutting grass. My parents would pay me like $20 to cut the whole yard. In hindsight, probably, some child labor laws there somewhere, $20 for a whole yard. Um, and I started cutting grass around the neighborhood, for people who would let me making a couple extra dollars. And yeah, just kind of started building a relationship with money. I don't think back then I really had as much of a concept of how important it was, other than I could spend it. And I think that's something that is uh, is like brought with us, like even in adulthood. Like a lot of people, you're having this conversation now. A lot of people don't really have the concept of money outside of it can buy me things. Like it can bring me like material wealth. It doesn't really do anything other than help me fill space in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, like I guess kind of looking back, like after graduating college and then realizing that like, hey, like I gotta pay back all that money that like I borrowed. Like I feel like it kind of hit me like, oh, I probably should have made better decisions and
Yeah.
not just taking out a loan. I should have just like I have friends. Remember, because I didn't go straight to college. Like I went to community college up in Northern Virginia, and then I ended up transferring down to VCU. But I remember I had a friend that went straight to college after high school. He went to Penn State, and he got like a bunch. He ended up like applying for a bunch of grants, and I was like, I'm not trying to spend time like writing essays to get money. Like I'm good. But in hindsight, I probably should have wrote those essays because he came out of college with like no debt. Meanwhile, I'm still paying my loans. But another story.
Yeah, I feel that. Should have applied for some more scholarships myself. Like I stayed at home since I'm from Richmond, so like I don't have as much loans as everybody else does, but it's still, I guess, it's still like it's still a lot of money I got to pay back at the end of the day. And I guess part of it too is like so I was in the IB program in high school. I don't know if y'all know what the IB program is. It's like International Baccalaureate Program. Um, and I kid you not, like one of the things they kind of sold us was this idea of like you get into this program, you graduate, like you're guaranteed to get into the college that you want. It ain't like that. And I don't care how great you were, like you still have to apply yours. You're still competing with everybody else. Um, so I ended up at VCU, still had to take out loans. They don't really educate you, at 17, 18 years old when you're going into college, telling you how you're going to pay these loans back. Like you're kind of sold that dream of, you go to college, you get the job, and you're going to be able to pay back those loans. Like you get the degree, like you're going to get a good job.
Yeah.
And it isn't like that. I mean, unless you're in like a STEM field, but like I graduated in, yeah, it's called political science, but it's still like a liberal arts program. And outside of working in government, which doesn't really pay well up front, you're kind of relegated to just finding whatever you want. And like my first job, I ended up working at VCU. I think I was making like $27,000. Like there's no way I was gonna be able to pay back my loans making that kind of money, even still living at home. Um, and I just think a lot of the stuff that we're gonna talk about is important because it's not even discussed, let alone taught. A lot of it's kind of just like uh, thought of as a given. Like you're just supposed to understand this stuff. Like, yeah, if you take out a loan, you're going to pay it back. 18-year-old has no concept of how much $50,000 is, let alone, you see people going to private schools, they come out just undergrad, they're coming out with, $100,000 in debt. They have no idea how much $100,000 actually is and how long it'll take to pay that back.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty confident that when I was working at Sprint full time, I was making more than I made when I graduated college at my first job. But then I had like close to 100 grand worth of debt. So it's
Mhm.
just like I'm starting from behind, but like I was making more before I came to college. Like, why did I do this? But eventually it compounded and it got better. But like there's a lot of education behind that and a lot of mistakes that were made. But
Yeah,
still,
a lot of time and stuff put in too. You gotta think like a lot of us, didn't go to school to be in tech. You kind of just fell into it. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like the money is great. Like the money was definitely a driving factor. But it wasn't something that I initially thought of when when I went to school. So like had I not gotten into this field, would I be feeling as well off as I am now? Because like I know people personally who are in other fields, like in fields that are in demand, like fields that we need, teachers, doctors, therapists, and they don't get paid the amount of money they should get paid to do what they do. And those are the kind of jobs that they have to go to school to get that education, which means 9 times out of 10, like they're taking out even more loans to get that master's or PhD that's necessary to get into that field. Um, and these are people that do have a concept of how much that money is, how much it's going to take to pay all that money back.
yeah. I guess Bobby or sorry, Sean. I guess what was your like transition into like wealth management? Like was that like always like a goal of yours, or like how did that come about?
I mean, it's well, kind of going back to the question first, like when you say, your first memory of money, that kind of really drives everything. Um, I mean, just from what I can see here, it looks like we're all minorities. We probably have somewhat of a same background growing up. Just from the people that talk so far, none of us was born with a golden spoon. And unfortunately, for a majority of people, especially in the minority community, our first memory of money or our first lesson from money, I can put it like that, comes after we made a mistake. You can talk about whether it was I shouldn't say a mistake, but it comes from a memory where we wish we could have done something different. We wish we would have known something else. We wish, we would have understood the consequences, or wish we would have realized the aftermath of decisions that we made. So like David was saying, as when you're younger, and when I say younger, I'll even go, mid 20s or under than that, you don't really know or understand what you're getting in yourself into when you really talk about debt, or even if you're blessed and you have a large sum of money. Um, so part of why I got into wealth management is because I really wanted to understand that. I've seen people that were look like me doing very well. I've seen people that look like me doing horrible. I've seen, young people, multi-millionaires at 19, 20 years old. Like I've seen a array of it all. So really, my transition into wealth was I wanted to know what was the difference. I wanted to know how can I get to the other side? What are they doing that I'm not doing, and it's not a big difference, but it is some of those subtle differences that can take someone from, hey, since you shared, y'all said I graduated VCU with $100,000 in debt. That $100,000 in debt can change the trajectory from you being a multimillionaire at 25, or whether you're still having to settle for a job or not being able to take the chances that you would have been able to take if you didn't have that debt, which is a big difference between, what it seems like we're relating to compared to some other people. Um, so my first memory of money kind of goes back to the same thing, was my first credit card. I didn't get allowance when I was younger, but I didn't have a need to want to buy anything. I grew up in Jersey on the beach, so my fun was just going to the beach, running around the sand, getting in the ocean, had a couple dollars, you buy a slice of pizza, ice cream, other than that, that was really it. I'm not big into fashion and wanting to have the nicest things. Um, but when I first got on my own when I was 19, I got a credit card, $5,000. I furnished my home apartment. All of a sudden, my job let me go. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay this credit card? We all know how that story ends. Luckily, it happened when I was younger, so it didn't impact me as much as it would as if something like that was to happen now. But those are the little lessons that nobody again taught what that really would be like on the other end that would have helped me make a better decision. Um, so, those life lessons, we all have a story similar to it, kind of help drive what we think about money. How do we value money? How do we feel about it? How do we spend it? A lot of people, again, with wealth management, I see, come from background like us where, they went through some bumps and hurdles to get their money. So now that they get it, they're very cautious of how they spend it, how they invest it, how they save it. So again, those early childhoods, and I would just speak for us here, as adults, when it comes to our children or anybody that, we mentor or, can feed into, those are the lessons that we should be sharing with them, because these small lessons, again, will impact them greatly, whether we see it or not. But those are the lessons that would definitely impact, future generations to come, to hopefully make better decisions and not go through some of the hiccups that we had to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's real. Like I feel like just in the last, let's say 6, 7 years, I've learned so many different things about like, oh, there's stocks, there's real estate, there's high yield savings accounts, like looking at the interest rate, like those sort of things like matter and like can affect like how much you're able to keep versus how much you don't keep, or even just like different like deductions and just there's like so much information out there that can be potentially like be helpful, but like you don't necessarily know it unless you've either gone through it or you learned it and then actually like applied it. Um, so it's just like if I were to potentially go back to college and have to go through that I guess experience again, like looking at like I have this option, this option, this option, and kind of looking at it like I guess potentially like real estate, where like I'm looking for the best bid to find out what makes the most sense versus who's just going to give me money. Because just because someone's going to give me money doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to give me the best terms for that money. And so that's like another thing to consider. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Um, but at the same time, I don't want to be in a position where like I'm 65 years old and I have to work. So I'd much rather, I guess, take those lessons now that I'm young and still able to recover from them versus not. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good, man. And I just kind of had a question. I don't want to throw you off, but just something that I frequent often in my work day, and it's a question that I kind of ask my clients, and it really gets to an understanding of their money, and you really start to realize how people value it, and the more that you talk to people, like you said yourself, yeah, like you learn from the people that you talk to, good, bad, or different. Um, but just a question, just kind of conversation, if anybody wants to share, it's where you're at in life right now. If you can feed into someone else that's maybe 17, what would you feed into them when it comes to money? What is something that you would want to prepare them for? What is something that you would want to teach them when it comes to finances in general? Because nowadays, I live in Georgia. I'm sure every state is a little bit different, but even in Georgia now, they don't even teach kids how to sign their name. So when somebody wants to go in to cash a check, I see a lot of people now, adults, grown adults, just writing their name, just even initialing on the back of the check. So a lot of people now don't even know how to sign their name to cash or to deposit a check, uh, um, which could be dangerous for a number of different reasons. Um, but just something that you feel you would be able to feed into, someone as a mentor. What would that look like for some of you?
Um, I guess my biggest thing is when you're young, take the risk. Um, like you talking about, you had your first credit card and you furnished your apartment, and then you got laid off and you couldn't figure out, how you're gonna pay all that stuff back. And those are all things that would definitely be scary. Um, but sometimes there's a lessons that you have to learn. Um, and like that, I'm not saying, take out a bunch of credit cards and, go and rack up a bunch of debt, just to learn a lesson. Um, take calculated risks when it comes to finances. Even now I do that. I make a little bit more money, but like I'm thinking about, I just applied for the SANS graduate program. That's like a $23,000 program to get 4 certifications from this company. But I'm also thinking about the return on the investment. Um, it's like, sure, I have to pay that money. But getting 4 of those certifications, I could definitely get my return on my investment, like real quick, getting those. So like my advice would just to be, take the risk. Don't worry about the money so much when you're young, so long as that risk is calculated. Because you also don't want to be in a place where, and I see this happen a lot, is where, you'll get the money and now your relationship with money has changed because you've got it. Now you've gone from, one end of the spectrum of having this like scarcity. No, not even one end of the spectrum. Like you just constantly maintain that scarcity mindset. Like you'll get the money and you just won't spend it. You won't spend it on anything. You won't spend it on vacation. You won't spend it on, going out to eat. You won't spend it on stuff that will make your quality of life and your experience in life a lot better. So yeah, my advice would just be like, think about your finances, of course, but don't be afraid to take risk. So long as that risk is calculated. Don't be afraid to spend if it's going to give you something that cannot be taken away from you later, such as knowledge, or an experience or a memory that you'll look back fondly on. Because at the end of the day, um, you can't take it with you. Like that is a lesson that I have learned personally within the last couple of years. Is it doesn't really matter how much money you have if you don't enjoy it while you have it, somebody else will. So, just take the risk, make it calculated, but spend responsibly, and always know that even when you're young, even if the risk doesn't pan out, that you have a lot of room to recoup those losses.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
I guess just to kind of follow up on that, I also shared a book that I've been slowly getting through that I've kind of really enjoyed, the Algebra of Wealth by Scott Galloway. He's a professor, I believe, up at NYU. Um, Basically just talks about economics, also kind of what David was touching on about, you can't really take it with you. So don't go out there and spend all of it, but make calculated risk with the money that you have. And that's something that I definitely trying to do a better job at. I find myself to be a little bit more of a hoarder with money. So I don't want to go out there and spend anything. If I get a bonus at work, tax return season comes in, I really don't buy anything. I'll put that into my savings account, or I'll toss that into my Roth IRA and just invest it that way versus trying to buy anything. And I'm slowly trying to get out of that, I would guess, like that hermit mentality of just hoarding my money and not going out and going on experiences or buying things kind of here and there that does provide me a little bit of joy in experiences. So definitely give it a read if you have the time, or Audible. It's definitely helpful. But I guess to double back on the first question on first experience with money, I would say college. I didn't really think about money that much growing up. Thanks to my parents, very much so grateful for that. But once getting out of college and realizing that I had a debt over my head, that was a little bit of a shocker. And then having to get out of that is something that kind of made me realize that there's credit card debt and you have to basically get out of that. And I think to Yao's point about like the grants, it wasn't something I thought about, and it's definitely something I should have. Because I do know some other students that went out and got federal grants, and the difference between getting a federal loan and private sector loan is completely different, which I never realized. Private sector loans, they don't disappear. Federal loans, you can get those expunged either through government service or even Biden doing a nice sweeping legislation to knock out your debt. Is it's all things I just never knew. And I wish I did would have going into it. Granted, my loan amount was extremely low. It was only like $20,000 to $25,000, so I was able to pay that off fairly fast. But it was definitely something that kind of gave me somewhat pause and made me like rethink going back in to go get a master's degree, just because I didn't want to go get a degree and then not be able to get my complete return on investment. So that was kind of a very eye-opening experience, at least on my side of the house. So.
I'll answer this, and then I got to drop probably right after. So I don't know. I feel like I've always had a understanding of money, even at a younger age. I've always had my parents talk about money and like the money issues we've had growing up. Definitely not a silver spoon or a golden spoon. And so like I remember like trying to go to camps or trying to do something and we couldn't afford it, so we couldn't do it. Couldn't go to rent a movie or to go out to eat sometimes because I just couldn't afford it. But I don't think my side of things is I don't think I appreciated money until I got into like $80,000 of debt, 60,000 from college and 20,000 from credit card. And then I had to move back home with my parents, and then I paid off, all that, in the course of about 3.5 years. So it wasn't until that moment happened that I started appreciating money more. And I think it was a little bit skewed on my side because I graduated college making 70,000 right out of, you know, my first job. So I was extremely a rare case where I was making so much money for my first job out of college, and I assimilated to what my parents were bringing in, bringing up a family of three, and you know I was just throwing money out the door every possible chance I had. So I think that was my case of not appreciating money and what its capabilities are. My one point of advice for someone is not only to take, I guess, the calculated risks, but understanding like the side effects of money and the impacts it has and the actual time it takes to pay things off. If you pay the minimum amount, if you carry over a balance, you know, if you do buy a $60,000 car and you're only bringing in $60,000, like that may not be right. The other thing I think people are miscued on is that the ability to, like, good things take time and impulsive decisions, right? So the taking 4 vacations a year and traveling to Europe and then traveling to Asia and then, you know, going to Africa, like all in the same year and thinking, well, I can't afford a house, but I can afford these vacations is slightly skewed because, again, good things take time. It took you 9 months to come into this world. So, yeah, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I can go next if anything. So the question about the 17-year-old, I would say just a couple of things. So number one, what I would recommend is stay at your parents' house as much as you can. Coming from an immigrant family, we believe heavily on staying in the parents' house until you get married. Why is that? Because also you get closer with family, and also you're able to save a lot more money doing that. So you're not paying your own rent. So, I mean, you can help them out, you know, giving them maybe like 400, 500 bucks a month, or getting groceries here and there, but you're not spending 1,200 a month on rent or other things, you know. So I would do that as much as possible. I never understood the whole mentality of like, oh, you're 18, so I'm going to kick you out the house so you can go find yourself. That to me is not, that's why it's rare and it's weird to us because we've never, you know, you basically raise your kid until you're 18 and now you're just telling them like, oh, just go ahead and go find yourself. It's very, very weird.
Yeah,
But
it's funny you bring that up real quick because that's a big topic within you know, our wealth community now is you know, I don't, you know, I'm trying to be careful how I say certain things here. But through a cultural dynamic, you know, I'll just speak of African Americans, like you say, you know, the majority of us are brought up when you're 18, you have to move out, you have to go figure it out, time for you to go live your life. Where there's a lot of other communities, whether it's the Hispanic community, the Asian community, you see it a lot with, you know, Jamaican, Haitian, Caribbean communities where they're brought up where they live together until they can either move out. And then even if you're religious, like I said, I'm trying to be a little careful here. It even says in the Bible that you're supposed to stay with your family until you wed, till you get married and moved out. So for a lot of families that are um, financially well off or they're considered high income earners, a lot of them are brought up in a similar situation to like what you said, where they live together within their family even after they're 18 until they graduate, until they can financially move out. And even like the other guy, I think his name was Chris, was just saying, you know, he was fortunate to be able to go back and live with his parents for 3.5 years until he was able to pay off his debt. And then, you know, financially, he's able to move out and probably do better for himself compared to a lot of other people who are forced into it and now seem to be struggling while they're finding their way. So not to cut you off, but that's a very big topic. So I'm happy that you brought that up. It's a big thing just within the wealth community as well.
yeah, I mean, it's just something that we've always been brought up in, and it's always something that I believe people should, you know, people should do is just why not? You know, why not actually be with your family, save as much as you can, help them out, and then also you're able to help yourself out by saving money and just being able to also invest in other things if you wanted to at the same time. Another thing too I would recommend is probably if their parents have good credit use, is to add them as an authorized user. So that's something that I've also learned later on in life. So basically, like if you have any kids starting at like 14 years old, 15 years old, put them on as an authorized user on their credit cards so they can start building their credit. So when they're 18, they're able to qualify for a higher amount in loans or money, just other things like that. It's super important. Like my sister already knows that her kids are about to turn 3 this month, but once he's turned 14, 15, she's gonna add them on as an authorized user because her credit's like 800 and she wants them to follow the same steps that she's doing, which is a great thing, that I've always told her. And another thing too is probably investing in index funds. So index funds is also very, very profitable, but also because of the compounding effect of it. So you could put in, $400 or $500 a month, and then in about 20 years, you have a lot of money stacked up, depending on which one you pick. But then also on top of that, you can get ones that pay you back in dividends. So with dividends, you get that money back. If you reinvest those dividends, it grows even more and more. Just depending on which ones you pick or which one you want to pick, it's a great thing to have. So going back to the question about the earliest relationship with money. So with me, I was about 7 years old. My dad would always give us an allowance of like $1 a day to go to the bodega and go buy, just like little snacks and stuff like that. But then at the time, my dad used to do Amway. So he used to do network marketing back in the day. And what's crazy is that he used to buy these little like breath sprays, and they would just stay at the house for like months. And I would take them to school, and people were like, yo, where you get those from? I was like, oh, I got a whole bunch. Let me bring some tomorrow, right? And I would basically sell his breath sprays for like $3 each at school. And my dad one day was like, hey, where's all my breath sprays? I'm like, I just started giving them away to my friends. So, but that was like my earliest relationship with money because, I'm like, if it's sitting around here for like months, why not make some money off of it? So, and that's what I started doing with it. And then another thing too is like later on is I found what's his name, Dave Ramsey, which some people it's like hit or miss. You can either like him or hate him, but the main principles I do like is at least that saving $1,000 for the emergency fund, and then also doing the snowball payment method of basically like once you pay off a loan, say you pay $200 a month, you use that money, that $200 towards the next bill that you have. So if it's a credit card or anything like that. So I was able to pay off my card 2 years in advance doing that. So my payment was like $540 a month, which was kind of expensive. What, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago? And at the time, I was like, I need to do something to get rid of this payment. And then I stumbled upon Dave Ramsey, and he was talking about, do the snowball method. Started doing that, and that also led me actually. Another thing too is I was donating plasma, so it might be a taboo thing to do, but I was making an extra $500 a month, which I was using that money to pay off that car loan, and I was able to do that 2 years in advance. So then I was able to use that $540 payment towards my next credit card and get that paid off. So like just removing debt also helps out a lot with trying to invest in the future for other things. So it's just that's my basic earliest thing with money, but that's what I recommend.
I just want to talk about the staying with your parents things you were talking about, Mariano. So let me put something into perspective. In case we come back to this or anybody else hears this, I talked about how like I have a low amount of debt for college for my student loans because I stayed at home even after all 4 years. And then I'm 32 now. I moved out the house last year. And I started investing consistently. Like I was dabbling a little bit like sophomore year, back around the time, like, I don't know if y'all remember, like the Acorns app came out. That's when I got started. Wish I had kept those Tesla shares that I bought, when they were $7. But after staying at home from graduation college, I was what, 22, 23. up until this point, investing consistently. Of course, I also increased my income, so definitely helped me set more money aside. I have 6 figures in my personal investment account, just from staying at home. I know a lot of people, I will say, to the credit of a lot of people, it may not be feasible because of the relationship they have with their parents. I get that. I totally get that. Financial wealth is definitely important, but your mental health is a lot more important. I understand. But if you have a good relationship with your parents, take advantage of it. It can definitely set you up for success long term. I wasn't really required to pay any bills for the longest time. I think I contributed to like my personal stuff, my cell phone bill, my car insurance, and like the electric and or cable bill at the house. But everything else taken care of. And I was able to set aside a very nice chunk of money. And even outside of that, I was able to set aside some money for other stuff and other accounts. I was able to buy a new car. I know most people say don't do that, but I got a good deal. That's the only reason I did it. But yeah, like if I love that, harp on that point, especially, and it's not just it's an American thing, Sean. It's like you saying, like it's
Oh,
really,
no. Yeah, like I said, I get it. It's a not just a cultural thing, but it's a society thing. Um, a lot of times in, our culture or just in the American culture, it's looked frowned upon. Oh, you're 25 years old and you still live at home with mom. When you say that, it depends on who you're talking to, because some
that's
people may
true.
say, well, yeah, yeah, like we good. Like me
Yeah,
and my
I
family, we
understand.
good. But then, you may talk to somebody else and you tell them, hey, I'm 25 years old, I'm staying with mom, we saving up, and they'll be like, what? You work where? And you still live at home with your family?
Yeah,
Like it's a total society mental dynamic that unfortunately, we wish it was just a magic wand that we can wave and, be able to negate some of those negative thoughts. But like to yourself as an example, there's not a lot of well, I'll just ask you, since you shared, do you think you would have been able to put yourself in the financial position that you're in if you didn't stay at home with your parents? If
no,
if you had to live on campus, if you had extra student loans because of your living expenses while you're at college. After college, if you had to find your own place, you're kind of the perfect example. Look at your life now financially compared to, I'll say myself, where, it took a long time and a lot of work for me to get to where I'm at like that because I didn't have that opportunity. I'm 36 and, just out of, my family, I'm married, I have 3 kids, so I've kind of, you know, progressing, a lot financially. There's a lot of other responsibilities I have. So for me to get to the point where you were at, it took me a lot more work, most likely a lot harder. Blessed with, the income of my spouse. But if I had the opportunity that you had, yes, my trajectory of life would have been totally different, from where I am today. So it's just, one of those things that, as we are, going to be mentoring, our kids, our nieces, our nephews, our smaller cousins, people you work with, your neighbors, just people who you meet, these are the type of conversations that truly, make a difference in, people's lives. And it's just one of those things that I'm happy he brought up. Like it's like you said, sometimes you got to be careful of how you talk about certain things. You don't necessarily want to go out and offend anyone. But that's a major thing that affects someone's life and how they go about living it and what, can truly be somebody meeting the max potential of their life or what they unfortunately just may have had to settle for in life because of, their circumstances.
but yeah, no, absolutely not. To answer your question, I would not have been
Yeah,
able to save that amount of money had I been gone out and finding like my own place. Um,
yeah.
and it's not just that. It's not just being able to save. It's you talking about mentoring. It's also
Hmm.
like the examples that you have. Um,
Hmm.
like my mom's a real estate agent. That's what she's been doing that since. Well, actually, she got into it before the '08 crash, and she's rode it out ever since. So I see her and I see like how well she's doing, and like she's, you know, got multiple properties that she manages, Airbnb in them. She's doing really well for herself. And she's worked for herself since then. My dad, who has since passed, he was a lawyer. He also worked for himself. And just seeing like the examples that they set, definitely planted that seed in me of like this is the kind of freedom I want in my life. I mean, yeah, they work for themselves, they definitely probably work harder than most people that work a 9 to 5. But like in all the years of seeing my dad work through weekends, he never seemed like he hated it. Ever. Regardless of what money was coming, he never seemed like he was hated it. My mom, I remember her taking us, getting her business off the ground and getting, familiar with real estate. I remember her taking me and my sister, after school, after we did our homework, late nights to like a McDonald's to sign contracts for clients that she was selling the house for, because that's what she wanted. And like, like those examples are nice to have. Maybe my kid looks at me and they're like, I like what dad is doing, but maybe cybersecurity isn't a thing for me. Real estate wasn't a thing for me, but it was the idea of, hey, how can I set myself up to have this kind of success that got me looking at investing, in my early 20s. Like what can I do to make that money? Without having to basically, without having to talk to people. I work in tech, I don't like to talk to people for real. It is what it is. Like, how can I make money without having to talk to people? Which led me to investing. Like, how can I make my money, basically work for me? So having those examples to kind of plant that seed in kids at a young age is also very, very important.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of living with your family, and I do think that we need to kind of change that narrative because I know it definitely helped out my family when my grandma first moved over here from Panama, and then the other folks started moving over as well. They had a free place to stay. They didn't have to go out and go find a job, go find a house, go find a place to eat. They had everything already set up, and being able to do that, they were able to bring over more people, and now they're able to flourish. So instead of having to wait, 4 or 5 generations to kind of basically build up wealth, they use that one anchor, which was my grandma and my grandfather, when they all moved over here to basically blossom from that. And it just made things a lot easier. And then as well, we used that also into the future so that when my cousin was going into medical school, she came and stayed with us instead of going out and renting her own apartment. It saved her money. It lessened the amount of loans that she had to do. And now she has her own private practice in Orlando. It's just, it just allows things to move and progress a lot faster. And it's something I've definitely noticed with a lot of different communities. And I do think, Sean, you're right. It's kind of in the American ethos is that you have to basically, build it by yourself or, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Yet we all know that that's not really a thing. The middle class was constructed by the US government. It wasn't something that was innately American. It was innately built by the American government for a subsector of the collective. And hopefully that doesn't, I'm not trying to like point fingers or say anything that's like bad or anything. It's just, it is what it is. That's kind of the world that we live in. But to that end, I think we need to really pull on our family structure and our family ties and those connections to help build wealth. Because even for myself, when I first moved to DC, I didn't go out and rent an actual apartment. I didn't go out and buy a condo. My buddy that I met at CNU when I was running track, he bought a condo in DC and he had a living room that had a little bit extra space in there. So I put a twin bed in his living room. I lived there for 2 years. I only paid $350 for rent, and all the extra money that I wasn't spending on going out and drinking as a new freshie out of college was going towards my student loan debt. So I was able to pay that down extremely fast. All my other friends were paying maybe like $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and $350 while I was coming out of college making $60,000 is I was able to save and invest the rest of it. And I would also say, like, I guess to like a 17-year-old is like, don't don't think it's a bad thing to kind of be in I guess, a moment of struggle, so to speak, or just because you're not doing things that other folks are doing, don't try and focus on it too much, because what you're seeing, especially with social media in terms of finance, isn't the actual complete picture. And that's something that even to this day, I'm still trying to get my mind wrapped around, because you see people traveling and doing all these amazing things and buying nice cars, and they're living on debt basically, and that's not the way that you should kind of go about thinking about money and life and just in general. So make sure that you're kind of looking, have a wide view, look at life, but then also realize that sometimes people are putting on a front as into what they're actually dealing with, and like what their actual finances are. That's something that I've definitely realized. And also that, the amount of salary that you make doesn't really matter. It's about how much you actually save and invest. And to me, that makes it means a lot more. Like, the person I know that is the most financially stable is a guy that makes, I think he's making like $80,000 a year, but he lives way below his means. But yet he owns multiple properties. He has tons of money in his emergency fund, and he's able to live a good life. But I know people that make $150,000, but they're $300,000 in debt from student loan debt because they went out and bought a brand new car, because they're going and flying to Tulum like twice a month. They're just burning through cash. And I've definitely fallen into that trap in the past, where I was like traveling and just kind of doing like silly little things like here and there, and not realizing like, hey, I need to actually do something with my money versus just kind of letting it go to like silly things. So
I would say one thing I wish I did earlier on, especially like post college, was track my money. So like I've heard about budgeting before, and I was just like, that sounds like a nightmare and doesn't sound fun and doesn't sound like something I want anything to do with. Um, but there was a period of time where I had like I worked at Capital One, and they approved me for a credit card for like 10,000, and I blew through it and accumulated like 12 to 15,000 dollars worth of debt, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. I was just like, why is it continuing to like grow so fast? And it seemed like no matter what I was doing in terms of trying to pay it down, like it was still there. And so I realized that like I had to pay more than the minimum balance, which hurt. And then trying to realize like where I could take money from, whether it was selling things or like not going out every weekend and spending money at the bar. What could I do to make sure that I was actually able to pay this down? That way it didn't crush me. Because I mean, just having the feeling of like I graduated from college, I did what they told me to do. I'm supposed to have made it, and now I'm paying rent, I'm paying electric, I'm paying utilities, I'm paying car insurance, and I'm also paying down my student loans while paying down this ever increasing credit card bill. Like, if I didn't like, so I guess there's like one perspective of, hey, it's happening, it is what it is. I'm just gonna bury my head in the sand and ignore it. But there's the other side of, no, I can take the action and do something about it. And so I chose to do something about it, and I was fortunate enough to be in a position where um, I say fortunate, but I ended up getting a job, didn't like it. I worked at Capital One, making like $35,000 a year. I was like, this is not it. Ended up going to like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. Ended up working at a law office, making like $36,000 a year. And I was like, I gotta figure something else out. Ended up moving messing with or having a friend mess with my resume to the point where I was able to start interviewing for tech jobs, and started making $40,000 a year, which wasn't much. But um, through one of those jobs, it was actually located in Newport News, whereas I lived in Richmond. So I had an hour and a half commute each way. And during that hour and a half commute, I ended up learning about this financial podcast, and I learned a lot of different things that help me to pay down those loans faster, but then also like pay more attention to my money, which definitely has aided my ability to do things I'm able to do now because of the fact that I like actually have a better idea of what my money's doing, where I'm spending money on. And I'm nowhere near perfect. Like there's still money going out the door. I'm just like, I don't know where it's going. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think overall, like just tracking your money, whether you're using an app or just like spreadsheets or even just like writing it down and being aware of your subscriptions and all the different ways that the marketing is trying to make you spend can definitely be very helpful over the long run because it allows you, to Chris's point, it helps you to make sure that you're keeping more of that money versus just spending it. So if I was to give I guess a 17-year-old or someone younger than I guess any advice would be one, track your money, be aware of the money that you're making and where it's going. And the second thing I would say is credit is important. Don't be afraid of it, but respect it. Because it definitely can help you if you have good credit, but it can also very much hurt you if you don't. So that's how I feel. Cool.
Cool. I'm gonna hop on real quick, y'all. This is Joe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna answer both of those questions. So my first relationship with money was like in elementary school. I can't tell you how old I was, but and it wasn't my birthday or anything. My parents gave me a $5 bill. I just thought I was the richest kid on the block, you know, and I didn't know what to do with it. Funny thing is, I lost that $5 bill and I never found it again. But I take that money, that memory, and I cherish it for the rest of my life because at that age, you don't know anything about money. You just know if the larger the number is, the more money you got in your hands, you know. But kind of growing up, I grew up in a 2-parent home. They both came from large families. So not a lot of money from both sides. So that's the kind of mentality that they grew up with. So kind of growing up, I start spending, you know what I mean? And even the kids today, the first relationship that they have with money is just spending. I get money, spend it, you know? Growing up, for me, I was more so materialistic. My parents weren't like big on spending so much, so I got a job, which I got through my father, at a grocery store, and I just started making money. You know, whenever I could work, but I spent all my money. Spent all my money on clothes, shoes, trying to attract females at the younger age, right? And that's just what my relationship was with money. It was just spending. But as I got older and when I started venturing off to college, throughout college, I learned that I can use, because I pretty much left Cleveland and moved about an hour away to Youngstown. I learned that I can use food stamps. I wasn't employed. I was 18. I learned how to use food stamps. I applied for food stamps. But I went and got a job in the city because I knew how to get employed, do a task or some type of labor and get money. You know what I mean? I also got employment on the campus. So I had a work ethic, which I got from my father. So one thing that I was amazed at with my father was that it didn't matter if it was rain, sleet, snow, cold, hot. If he was sick, he'd get up every morning and go to work. I wouldn't see him before school. And that was like an amazement to me, because we always have excuses for why we don't want to go to work. So I seen that every day, and I was like, okay, well, those are some big shoes to fill, but if he can do it, I can do it too. So that's always been stuck with me. One thing I did learn from him, he kept a bank account in Chicago, Illinois. and we're in Cleveland, Ohio. You know, today we're exposed to Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, things of that nature. And his point of doing that is because he learned that if he can't have immediate access to his funds, he's able to save his money more. And that's something that I learned from him, kind of growing up too, was that if depending on who you are, because you know everyone doesn't have the same relationship with money. Some people, if they get money, they just prone to spend it. And for others, if you don't see it, that's a good thing. And that's how I've always been. So kind of getting past college, I know I had debt. I still put it in forbearance because I didn't care, which was a mistake, right? Over the time, that stuff adds up. But what I did learn in relation to money was I learned how to open accounts. And I probably got maybe 4 major accounts open right now. But the very first one was with Chase. And then I moved to a Fifth Third Bank. Then I moved to a credit union. But whenever I got a check, I've always divided my money up so that my money could go to different accounts, whether it was for fun, whether it was for paying off student loans, whether it was for investment purposes. That's how I got over my relationship with money. So whatever was left outside of me putting 400 here, 300 here, 150 there, whatever that balance was, that was my income. So even if my income was $400 for 2 weeks, that's what I accepted. Like I make 400 a week. But that allowed me to save money for what I needed to take care of. And that's kind of how I've built my relationship with money over the years, is subjecting whatever amount of money that I need to divide up for purposes of investing, purposes of student loans, purposes of just fun for the family, whatever the case. I don't look at that account unless I need to for those purposes. Anything outside of that was my income that I needed to spend on bills or whatever the case. And from there, because once I left for college, that was pretty much it for me. But I've always had, if I needed to go home, I could. But I left from Ohio. I moved to Georgia and Atlanta. I moved to Oxford and Anniston and Alabama, and now I'm here in Richmond. Between those moves for one, it was a level of maturity, but also was a growth in my income. So me having a background in electrical engineering, I found that I can expedite my income by getting my experiences from different big companies. So I got my first experience out of college with my degree from an integrator local to Cleveland. They paid me $52,000, and every increasement from there has been from a Honda. I work for Nestle right now, and then prior to that was a metals company, Novelis. These are larger Fortune 500 companies. But me being in Cleveland and in the same household, I wouldn't been able to mature where I am now. So I do get the idea that you know, saving money at home is a great thing, but I think it's also there's a portion of maturity and environment in there. At least it was for me, that I knew that I had to expand and move around a bit for me to get to where I was at personally today. And so as far as answering the question about what would I give an advice to a kid, like I have a 14-year-old daughter. I'm her bank. So I've been teaching her how to finance. She just got into 9th grade. She needed a Mac computer, she felt, for school. I loaned her the money, but I charged her interest. I spoiled her up until this age. But right now it's at a point where, okay, you need to start learning these concepts. So I put an interest rate on it. I gave her a length of time that she needed to pay it. I gave her a monthly deadline, and I gave her those concepts for her to be able to build up and to understand what financing is like and to be out in the real world and on your own. And then as far as the relationship with money, my biggest advice is to be able to not only know what type of money you got coming in, but be able to divide your money up into the necessities of your life. So it may only be like 2 bills, but put those 2 bills in a different account so you don't have to worry about that money. It's already accounted for. And that's kind of my 2 cents.
That's dope. I appreciate the fact that you're charging interest. Smart.
and she was like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah," but my interest rate is like 2%, 1%, 1.5%. But it's the fact that there's some math behind it. So, and she's good with math. So there's a little bit more just to saying I'm taxing you. You know what I mean? But yeah, that I found that funny too.
Is there a balloon?
No balloon on there. Yeah.
Word. That's dope. Yeah. I appreciate all you guys for hopping on. And just going through questions, conversations. I know we're like 15 minutes past. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Probably should have said it earlier, but at the same time, again, I want to thank you guys. Definitely trying to do another one of these. I'll try to think of like an idea of like a topic. But I'll let y'all know if y'all are open to it. But yeah, that was really it. Y'all got any